We want to, of course, thank Rosh Schachter for joining us this evening. Rosh Yeshiva speaking on Inyanei Pesach. This year is sponsored by Sherry and Saul Zimmerman in memory of Saul's mother, Chaya Bas Avraham, Neshama Shehab and Aliyah. And without further ado, we again appreciate Rosh Yeshiva being with us and look forward to hearing his words on Inyanei Pesach.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Shalom Aleichem. I was asked to speak specifically about Mechiras Chametz. The institution of Mechiras Chametz as we have it today is clearly what we call in English a legal fiction. There's a prohibition in the Chumash, Bal Yirah B'Yom Motzei. You're not allowed to have Chametz in your possession. Not only are you not permitted to eat Chametz, you're not permitted to get any benefit from chametz. You're not allowed to have it in your ownership. So we leave all the chametz in our home, and we sell it to the non-Jew, and after Pesach we buy it back. It's not that we have a grocery store and we're selling groceries to the non-Jew. We just sell it, and then we buy it back. So that's in English, you call that a legal fiction. So is that permissible to have such an idea, to have a legal fiction? So there is a Gemara in the beginning of Maseches Bechoros, where the Gemara says Jews always used to be farmers, and they were farmers to plant things on the farms. They were farmers to raise animals. So if you have a kosher animal and it gives birth for the first time to a male, a zocher, a vlad zocher, so then the vlad, the calf or the goat, whatever it is, has a kedushas korban. It's a bechor b'hema tahira, and you have to be makravit on the mizbeach. If you don't have any Beis Hamikdash, so you have to wait till the animal gets a mum. You're not permitted to make a mum, even though you can't be makravit because there is no Beis Hamikdash at all, but you're not allowed to make any mum. You have to wait till it gets a mum by itself. It could take forever to get a mum. You're not allowed to let the animal graze near a fence that has barbed wire, because you're causing it to develop a mum. You're not allowed to cause the mum be a dime. The Mishnah tells a story that there used to be a non-Jewish Roman policeman in Eretz Yisrael after the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash, who his beat, where he stood, where he would walk, would be right near the Jew's farm. And he noticed that all the other animals, they would use them to do work. And one animal, one cow, he never had the farmer never had that animal do any work. So the Goyish policeman asked the Jewish farmer, "What is that, a holy cow? How come you don't use it to do any work?" He says, "Yeah, it's a holy cow." What does that mean, a holy cow? He knows that they don't bring karbanis. There's no basic. He says, "No, that was the firstborn, and it's a male, and it has a kedusha, even though we don't have to be magdashit. It's kaddish automatically. The bechor b'hema Torah, the firstborn male vlad is kaddish automatically." So the Goyish policeman says, "What are you going to do?" So he says, "Well, I'm not allowed to make a mum." He explains to him in Roman, "I'm waiting till it happens by itself." So the Goyish policeman says, "No problem." So he takes a knife and he cuts the ear of the behema. So the Mishnah has a din that if I ask the non-Jew to make a mum, I encourage the non-Jew to make a mum. That's like I myself made a mum, and there's a penalty midrabanan that you can't shecht, you're not allowed to shecht the bechor until it gets a mum. And then once it gets mum, you have to give it to a kohen. It's one of the 24 matnas kahuna. You have to give it to the kohen shechts it. So the Mishnah has a whole discussion. Is that considered as if the Jew encouraged, he didn't mean to encourage the Goyish policeman to cut the ear, but the Goyish policeman understood that he'd be doing him a favor. So that's a discussion in the days of the Tanoim. So the Mishnah says that the Gemara tells a story that one of the Amoraim had a farm to raise animals, and the din is if you have a non-Jewish shuttif in your business, even if he has a small percentage of the shuttis, the whole din of bechor b'hema Torah doesn't apply. So this Jewish farmer, he wasn't interested in making the shuttis with a non-Jew, but he did it in order not to have the headache of having a bechor b'hema Torah. So he was punished min hashamayim, and all of his animals died. He lived after the Churban Abayis. So why is it being punished? because if he wouldn't have had a shutfus for the guy, at least the animal would have been one of the, you have to wait till it gets a mum, and then it's a mitzvah to give it to the kohen. It's one of the 24 matnas kahuna. But because they made a shutfus for the non-Jew, so the whole mitzvah b'char be'emador didn't apply at all. So you're not allowed to do shtick. That's called ha'arama. You're not allowed to do shtick in the normal course of events. The Jew would have not had a non-Jewish partner. He only made a partnership with the non-Jew in order not to have the headache of having a b'char be'emat Torah. So that the Gemara says that's why he deserved to be punished. So Tosfos poses the question, but we do it all the time. Many in the days of the Balei HaTosfos and in Europe before the Second World War, for quite a few centuries, there were Jewish farmers, and that's how they avoided the problem, by making a shutfus with a non-Jew, so they don't have to worry about the b'char be'emat Torah. So Tosfos asked the question, do we do it all the time? So how come, if the Gemara says that they deserve to be punished and all the behemoths should die, how come we do it? So Tosfos explains it depends what motivates you to make the shutfus for the goy. Today we make a shutfus for the goy because we are afraid, not so much, we don't want to give away the b'chor to the kohen. If that's what the Torah says, we give away. Give truma to the kohen, give pidyon ben. They give many 24 matnas. There are more than 24. The Tanoim combine a whole bunch together, so they have a calculation. 24 matnas, but there are more than 24. So Tosfos says it depends what motivated you to use the harama, to use the legal fiction. If the thing that motivates you to make the shutfus for the guy, or let's say by the mechiras chametz, it's also in the normal course of events. I don't sell my groceries to a guy. I use all the groceries, I eat them. I sell it to the guy, then I buy it back after Pesach. What kind of business is this? So the whole thing is only a legal fiction. So Tosfos says it depends what motivates you to do it. If what motivates you is that you don't want to violate an avera, so you do whatever you have to do by hook or by crook in order not to violate an avera. So Tosfos says we don't know how to make a mum. If you would make a mum in the b'chor before it's born, if you could succeed in sticking your hand inside the womb of the mother cow that's about to give birth and make a mum in the fetus without killing the fetus. So in the days of the early Amoraim, the days of the Tanoim, the early Amoraim, they knew how to do that. So if you would make a mum, then it wouldn't be, that would be okay, because there's no Beis Hamikdash, and you can't be makravit as a korban, and you made the mum before it gets the kedushas korban, before it's born. And if the b'chor is born with a mum, so then you have the mitzvah to give it to the kohen. So then if instead of making the mum before it's born, you're going to make a shutfus with the non-Jew, then you pati yourself completely from the whole mitzvah of giving the b'chor to the kohen. So that's not right. To do a harama, to do a shtick in order to pati yourself from a mitzvah is not right. But in the days of the later Amoraim, in the days of the Balei HaTosfos, they didn't know how to do that. To make a mum before it's born without killing the uber, it's very complicated. So in order to avoid violation of the Isser, if you let the b'chor to be born, allow it to be born, then you're not allowed to make a mum, and it may take years, may take months, may take years till it develops a mum on its own. So then for sure someone's going to violate your din of me'ila behegdish. Someone's probably going to get hanor from the animal. If it's hegdish, you're not allowed to get any hanor. So what motivated the people to make a shutfus with the guy was in order to protect themselves from violating the Isser of Hegdish. So then it's permissible to do ha'arama. So that's really the story by mechiras chametz as well. We sell the chametz to the non-Jew. Do we do it? What motivates us to do that? That's in order not to have to burn the chametz? No. You have a bag for the chametz that we burn. Is the mitzvah bigger? Let's say if I have 10 pounds of chametz, or I have 1 pound of chametz. It's not a bigger mitzvah. You have to dispose of the last bit of chametz that you have. So if you sell, let's say I sell 95% of all of the chametz that I have, I sell to the guy. And after selling 95%, after the rabbi sells, usually Erev Pesach in the morning, after the rabbi sells 95% of the chametz, then the 5% that's left, I burn that. So I will be in fulfillment of the mitzvah of tashbisa. I will burn the chametz. I don't enhance the mitzvah by burning all 100%. If you sell 95%, you burn the last 5%, you're also yotze the mitzvah. So the selling of the chametz is really not in order to relieve myself from observing the mitzvah of tashbisu, destroying chametz. It's to protect myself from violating Bal Yirah by matzah 95% of the chametz. And then I fulfill the mitzvah by burning the 5% at the end. So I am fulfilling the mitzvah. So that's why we assume that this is permissible. This institution of selling chametz began on the 1800s. Before then, you never had, in the days of the Tanoim, the only source that you have in a Tosefta, that's from the days of the Tanoim, the only source you have is if a Jew went on a boat trip for business, they used to sometimes travel for weeks and for months, and he has to have some food that's not going to spoil on the boat. So he takes with him a big loaf of bread. And then what's he going to do? He's going to throw the loaf of bread into the ocean or into the river. So he won't have any, before Pesach is going to destroy the chametz, he won't have any food left. He has to have some food. He has to have something to eat. They didn't have any cafeteria on the boat. Every passenger on the boat had to bring his own food. So the Tosefta, from the days of the time, Tosefta describes the din. The Jew who's on the boat should sell the bread that he has to the goy. They're going to be goyish passengers on the boat. And after Pesach is over, he'll buy it back from the goy. But you don't have, they didn't have the practice of selling chametz like we have today. That began in the 1800s. The one who approved it was the author of the Nesivos HaMishpat. That's a commentary on Choshen Mishpat. There's the Ksos HaChoshen and the Nesivos. So the Nesivos, the name of the author of the Sefer is Rabbi Yankov Lorberbaum, and he lived in the city Lisa. So he's known as Rabbi Yankov from the city Lisa. So he was the one who approved, and it started originally with farmers. The farmers had the practice of feeding chametz to their animals every day of the year. So then what do they do on Pesach? They can't feed the chametz. So some had the practice, they would sell the chametz to a goy, the goyish neighbor, the next door neighbor farmer, and the Jew would instruct the neighbor, please feed my behemoth from the chametz that belongs to you. I sell the chametz to the goy, so it doesn't belong to me. I'm not in violation of having chametz in my possession. There's no Bal Yirah by matzah, and I would ask the goy to feed my animals. So then the Rabbanim said, that's not good enough. You're asking the goy to feed chametz to your behemoths, you're getting hanoah from the chametz. Chametz is also b'achila. Chametz is also b'hanoah. You're not allowed to gain any benefit. So you have to sell the cows and the chametz to the goy. So the cow doesn't belong to you. The goy is feeding the chametz to his own behemoth. So the author of the Nesivos, Rabbi Yankov Lorberbaum, in the early 1800s, he was the one who approved this practice. And there was another prominent rabbi, Rabbi Yankov Lorberbaum has a sefer, a collection of Shadas Tshuvos that's called Nachlas Yaakov. He was a rabbi in a community. So half of the sefer is a collection of sermons, drushes that he gave on Parshas HaShavua, Hespedim, Yamim Tovim, has a few very famous drushes that people say over a lot. The Brisker Rov used to say over some of his drushes. I remember Rabbi Gerelik told us some of the things that he heard from the Brisker Rov. They're all found in that sefer. And he has half of the sefer, Shadas Tshuvos. So this is the first tshuva in the Nachlas Yaakov. The rabbi from Buchach, which was a little village in Galicia, the rabbi from Buchach was upset with him. And he quoted from the Talmud Yerushalmi, Maseches Ma'aser Sheni, that there's only one area in halacha where we permit this kind of a shtick, this kind of harama. What is that? The din usually is whatever grows in Eretz Yisrael, let's say fruits, vegetables, grain, bebalach, whatever grows in Eretz Yisrael, you have to be mafresh trumas ha'maisros. You have to give 2% to the kohen, 10% to the Levi, and then 9% is Ma'aser Sheni, Ma'aser Rani, depending on what year the Shemitah cycle it is. So the din is, if you have Ma'aser Sheni, today we can't eat Ma'aser Sheni in Yerushalayim because everybody's tamei, and the Ma'aser Sheni is tamei, and there's no Beis Hamikdash, there's no Mizbeach. So there are three reasons why we can't eat the Ma'aser Sheni. But still, you have to be mafresh the Ma'aser Sheni to take off the din of Tevel. So what do you do if you have Ma'aser Sheni? So you have to be paid the Ma'aser Sheni. So today, since the money is going to be hoylach libud anyway, we're going to have to destroy the money because we can't bring the money to Yerushalayim and buy food and eat the food, b'kedushas Ma'aser Sheni. So you're permitted to be paid in the Ma'aser Sheni on the Ma'aser Sheni is worth hundreds of thousands of dollars all over Eretz Yisrael. The 9% of everything that grows in Eretz Yisrael is worth a fortune of money. So today they're just paid on a pruta. They don't give more than a pruta. But in the days of the Beis Hamikdash, they used to be paid based on the value of the food. So if the farmer is paid his own Ma'aser Sheni, he has to be Ma'aser Chaimish. Let's say the Ma'aser Sheni is worth $100. He has to give $125. We would call it 25%. In days of the Tanaim, they call it 20% because $25 is 20% of 125. It's Chaimish, 1/5 of the sum total, the Karen with the Chaimish together. $25 is 1/5 of 125. We would call it 25%. We wouldn't call it Chaimish. We would call it Rova. But that's what the Chumash calls a Chumash. So the Mishnah says, so instead of giving $100 for my own Ma'aser Sheni that's worth $100, I'll have to give $125. So then when I go to Yerushalayim on Sholosh Regalim, I have to spend $125 worth of money that I bring with me to buy food and eat it in Yerushalayim. The Kedusha v'Tahara. The Kedusha from the Ma'aser Sheni goes on the money. Then the Kedusha goes from the money onto the salami sandwiches or the wine and the beer. And the Sata Kesa Ba'Bakar Batzona Ba'Yayin Ba'Shecher. So that's a tircha. Instead of $100, I'll have to stay another day. And Yerushalayim, I have to go back, get back to work. I have to go back home. I can't spend so much time in Yerushalayim. I'm taking off for Shalosh Regalim. It's enough. I have to take off another day or two to spend $125 instead of $100 worth. So the Mishnah gives you a chochmah. How do you do a shtick to be paid in the Ma'aser Sheni without adding on the Chaimish? The $100 is the Karen that you have to give. How can you avoid adding on the $25, the 25% extra? So the Mishnah says, if you give the money to your next door neighbor, you have to give the money without any strings attached. If I give my next door neighbor who's Jewish, I give him $100 and I say, I'm giving you the $100 on the condition that you use this money to redeem my Ma'aser Sheni, then it's my money. So I'm being paid in my Ma'aser Sheni. Then I do have to add a Chumash. I have to give the $100 to the next door neighbor without any strings attached. Next door neighbor may decide to pocket the money. No strings attached. So he won't use it to be paid in my Ma'aser Sheni. So it has to be if the next door neighbor is a good friend of mine and he's not going to double cross me. So I give him the $100 and then he'll say on his own, he'll be paid in the Ma'aser Sheni. So when someone else is paid, you only have to give the Karen, you only have to give $100, you don't have to give the extra 25%. So the Talmud Yerushalmi comments on that Mishnah, what can you do to avoid adding on the 25% extra? So it says, give the money to the next door neighbor. The Talmud Yerushalmi said, this is the only area in halacha where we permit harama, where we permit such a shtick, a legal fiction. In all other mitzvahs, we don't permit the harama. So the rabbi from Buchach sent a letter to the author of the Nesivos. How can you permit the farmers to sell the cows with the chametz to the goy, and the goyish next door neighbor is going to feed the cows the chametz? That's a harama, and the Yerushalmi says you don't permit the only place where you permit harama is by Ma'aser Sheni, based on a pasuk and chumash. So the author of the Nesivos sends it back a letter. Go fly a kite. Don't bother me. My psak has been accepted by all the rabbanim in Lithuania. We don't paskin like you, Yerushalmi. The Bavli never says anything like that. We allow harama. We allow harama to avoid violation of an avera. We don't allow harama to pati yourself from a mitzvah. Let's say, I'll sell all the chametz to the goy and I won't destroy any chametz. In the normal course of events, I have chametz and I have a mitzvah to destroy. So you can't sell all the chametz to the goy and not fulfill. Let's say some people want to go away for Yontif, so they don't want to do bedikas chametz. It's annoying. So they rent a whole apartment to the goy and they pot to themselves some bedikas chametz. That's not right. At least if you rent 90% of the apartment to the goy and you keep 10%, at least you're doing bedikas chametz and 10% of the apartment. But to rent away the whole apartment a week before Pesach in order to avoid the mitzvah with the rabbanon of bedikas chametz, that's not right. We only permit a harama. That was the klal of Tosfos. We only permit a harama, this kind of a legal fiction, if it's to avoid violation of an averet. But if it's to relieve yourself from fulfilling a mitzvah, that's not proper to do. So how did they figure out how to sell the chametz to the non-Jew? So this was always a practice, the original mechiras chametz that they started in the 1800s with the blessings of the author of Rabbi Lorberbaum. This was patterned after mechiras behema hamavakeres that was always practiced from the days of the Balei HaTosfos. There were many Jewish farmers, and they raised animals, And the female animals, if they're about to give birth for the first time, and there's a 50-50 chance it may be a male, and maybe a female will be born. If it's a male, then it has Kedushas Korban. So you're going to have a problem. You may violate the din of Me'ilah if you'll allow it to become a korban. So the practice always was that they made a shutfus for the goy. They don't have to sell the whole behemoth that's about to give birth to the goy. Just make a 1% shutfus, and that's enough. So over the years, different suggestions were made how to sell behemoth hamavakeres. So then they finally, over the years, they finally worked out a whole system that they made 6 kinyonim. Why did they need 6 kinyonim? So we'll explain it briefly. They made 6 kinyonim because each kinyon was a little questionable, whether it's valid or not. We know from the Gemara how to sell property. If a Jew sells to another Jew, we know which kinyonim work. It depends whether he's selling karka, real estate, or metaltalim, or movable things. In New York State also, there's a difference between selling karka and selling metaltalim. If you sell karka, if you sell real estate, you have to have some kind of a document. If you sell metaltalim, you can make a kinyan orally, just to make a declaration. I sell the bag of potatoes to you and you owe me $1.50 and shine. You don't have to make any hagbah, you don't have to make any meshicha, chalipin, you don't need any kinyanim. Only if you're selling karka, you need. So the halacha distinguishes, the Jewish halacha distinguishes between karka and metaltalim. Well, we feel you always need a maisi kinyan. You just make an oral declaration, I hereby declare that all my chomets belongs to the non-Jew. That doesn't help. An oral declaration is not valid. According to halacha, that's, you look in the Rambam, Hilchas Mechira, Perek Aleph, halacha Aleph, that's the first principle in the Rambam, number 1, chapter 1, number 1, Ein hamekach nikne b'dvarim. Just by making an oral declaration that I'm giving you ownership of my chomets does not accomplish the trick. So over the years, they worked it all out. So they made 6 kinyanim when you sell the behemoth that's about to give birth to the non-Jew. You make a shutfus, 1% shutfus. So they carried over all the 6 kinyanim to the case when you're selling the chametz. I always used to get on Purim, a lot of people gave me a lot of schnapps. I never drink any schnapps, only when I have a cold. When you have a simcha, so when you have a bris, or my relatives would have a bris, or friends, relatives, I would give the schnapps away. So a month before Pesach is Purim, so I would have a whole carton full of bottles of schnapps. Now in recent years, nobody gives me any schnapps. They give me wine. So I have a house full of wine. I have at least 100 bottles of wine. But I used to have 6, 7 bottles of schnapps. So I would put all the bottles of schnapps in a cardboard carton, and I would speak to my next door neighbor, who was a non-Jewish fellow. He apparently enjoyed drinking schnapps. And I would ask him, I'd like to sell you all the schnapps. I showed him, and I'll sell you the whole thing for $25 because it's my holiday. I'm not allowed to have it in the house. I'm not allowed to keep it. I'm selling it to you. You can do whatever you want. If after the holiday is over, another 10 days after the holiday is over, you're not interested, I'll buy it back from you. So my neighbor would give me the $25. All the schnapps would disappear the first night. Nothing. And a few years later, he died from a liver condition. Schachter killed his next door neighbor. But I didn't tell him to drink all the schnapps in one night, but he would drink all the schnapps. He understood that it's a real mechira. It wasn't haram. And he only paid $25 and he got a few $100s worth of schnapps. I think it was worth a lot of money. So if the fellow pays me the full amount, all I asked for was $24. It was probably worth much more. I only asked for $24. He paid in full, and then he picked it up and he took it to his apartment. So that for sure belongs to the guy. That's no shaila. The issue today is that the balabatim don't want to sell the chametz on their own because they don't know all the fine details of how to make the kinyanim. And the way it was worked out over the years, b'chiras behema hamavakeres, how do you sell a behema that's about to give birth for the first time? And you don't know, maybe 50-50 chance. It may be the first vlad will be a zachar, it'll have a kedushas korban. So they worked out a whole system that they make 6 kinyanim. So most people don't know how to make all the 6 kinyanim. So the minig always was that you ask the rabbi to act as your shaliach, and the rabbi sells the chametz for all the balabatim. So the rabbi is selling for 100 different balabatim. You can't expect the guy to make a hagbah. What is going to take everybody's chametz taken into his apartment? Here, my next door neighbor took 1 carton with all the bottles of schnapps. He took it into his apartment. He paid me in full, and he took it into his apartment shine. It belongs to him. But he's not going to pick up all the chametz from everybody's apartments. So we have to do a whole bunch of kinyanim to make sure that it belongs to the non-Jew. So when you first begin, the minig, the Rambam writes this, the minig always was, whenever you appoint a shaliach, you make a kinyan to demonstrate that you really mean it. The Rambam says it's not necessary to make a kinyan. I can appoint the Balabatam, appoint the rabbi as a shliach by making an oral declaration. You can call on the telephone and say, hey, I appoint you as a shliach, please sell a chametz for me. So the Rambam writes, already in the days of the Rambam, there was a minig that the rabbi makes a kinyan with the balabas. The din is whenever you make a kinyan, let's say I want to sell you my house. I want to sell you some furniture. So you're the one who wants to buy, so you give me your handkerchief. In exchange for your handkerchief, I give you the ownership of the building, and now you owe me $1 million for the building. Or let's say I want to sell you an automobile, I want to sell you furniture. So the one who wants to acquire ownership gives me a handkerchief. It's their tachazeh. In exchange for the handkerchief, I give you ownership of the automobile, and you got to pay me $2,000 for the automobile, or $25,000, whatever the automobile is worth. So here, by Mechiras Chametz, when you appoint the rabbi as a shliach, the rabbi gives his handkerchief to Balabas. In exchange for which, the Balabas gives the rabbi the right to act as his shliach. He gives him the power. The Balabas gives the rabbi the power to act as his representative to sell a chametz on his behalf. The same thing, let's say, once in a while there's a very bitter divorce, and the husband and the wife don't even want to face each other when the get takes place. And the get has to be given. The husband has to give the get to the wife. But if they're not on speaking terms at all, they don't want to face each other. So you have the husband appoints a shliach, or the wife will appoint either one or the other. Either the husband will appoint the shliach, or the wife will appoint. So let's say the husband appoints somebody as a shliach to represent him, to write the get and to give the get to the wife. So the one who's appointed as a shliach gives a handkerchief to the husband. He's not acquiring ownership over anything. He's acquiring the right to act as his shaliach. So that was a minig. That was an old minig. So the Rambam says it's a minig. It's not needed. It's not necessary al pi din, and it doesn't really accomplish anything. So the Chazon Ish and his brother-in-law, the Stipler, Chazon Ish had, I think, 13 or 14 siblings, something like that. They were all the boys were rabbis, and all the sisters were married to rabbis. They were all prominent rabbis. So one of the famous brothers-in-law of the Chazon Ish was the Stipler going. He came from the city Harna Stipel. So the Chazon Ish and the Stipler, when they used to ask the rabbi, when they lived in Eretz Yisrael, they would ask the rabbi to sell a chametz on their behalf. They wouldn't make a kinyan chalipin. They wouldn't make a kinyan with the rabbi because they said, the Rambam says that it's a minik tois. It's a minik shtus. It doesn't make any sense, so you don't have to do it. Rabbi Soloveitchik didn't agree with that. Rabbi Soloveitchik said the Rambam starts off by saying that there's no need for a kinyan and that kinyan doesn't accomplish anything. But then the Rambam explains why the kinyan does make sense. Rabbi Soloveitchik was a big stickler. He said even if the balabas calls up on a telephone on Erev Pesach, the last minute, he forgot to come to the rabbi's home to make a kinyan. So even if the balabas comes on the telephone, Rabbi Soloveitchik explained how the rabbi can fulfill this minig. You should always try to fulfill the minig of making a kinyan with the balabas when he appoints you as a shliach to sell a chametz. So that's the practice. The balabatim appoint the rabbi as a shliach, and the rabbi sells everybody's chametz. So the common practice is that you make 6 kinyanim when you sell a chametz. What are the 6 kinyanim? So there's one kinyan that's described in Megillas Rus. That's what we call kinyan suder, kinyan chalipin. I give you a handkerchief in order to acquire ownership of your automobile. I give you a handkerchief, and I owe you $20,000 for the automobile. But the automobile belongs to me. You can't back out. It's too late. We made a kinyan chalipin. I gave you handkerchiefs. I'm kind of the automobile. I want to buy a house. So I give you a handkerchief and I acquire ownership of the house. Now I have to pay you $1 million for buying the house. The handkerchief is not in payment. The handkerchief is just to make the Maisa kinyan. So, and this kinyan chalipin that we call kinyan suder, kinyan chalipin, it says in the Navi, in Megillas Rus, this is l'kayem kol davar, for anything and everything under the sun. Other kinyanim only work on karka, real estate, don't work on metaltalim. And other kinyanim only work on metaltalim, don't work on karka. The one and only kinyan, not exactly, but the one kinyan that works both on karka and on metaltalim is kinyan chalipin because the pasuk says l'kayem kol davar. It works on anything and everything. So why don't we just simply, the rabbi wants to sell chametz from 100 families to the non-Jew. So the non-Jew will give his handkerchief to the rabbi, in exchange for which the rabbi gives ownership to the non-Jew for all the chametz, and the guy will have to pay. They have to pay, so he'll have to pay, but he already acquired ownership of all of the chametz by giving the handkerchief. So that would solve the whole problem. That's the easiest kinyan at all. And Tosfos writes in the beginning of Kiddushin, the Rabbeinu Tam, what did the Rabbeinu Tam do for a parnasa? He was a money lender. How do you make money? Lending money. You can't charge any interest. You can't charge interest if you lend to a Jew. But if you lend to a non-Jew, then you can charge interest. So Rabbeinu Tam always used to lend to a non-Jew. And he used to charge interest. How did he get the money in the first place? This, I don't know. Maybe he got from Rashi. Rashi was a wine merchant. Rabbeinu Tam was a grandson of Rashi, whatever. Somehow he got a Yerusha, and that's what he did for a living. So sometimes he would sell chayvus, he would sell the debts that non-Jews owed him money. He would sell the rights to collect the money to a different non-Jew, and he would sell it by making kinyan chalipin. So the Rabbeinu Tam says it's perfectly legitimate to sell to a non-Jew by making a kinyan chalipin. So that would be the easiest thing. Sell all the chametz. The rabbi should sell all the chametz to the non-Jew. Non-Jew will give a handkerchief and he'll acquire everybody's chametz wherever it's located. And shine, that solves the whole problem. So the Shach in Chosh Mishpat questions whether the Rabbeinu Tam is right. Because when you read the pasuk in Megillas Rus, it says, Zos hatu'uda bi-Yisrael. Zos lefanim, two psukim, Zos lefanimi. So this was the practice by the Jews. So that word says twice, bi-Yisrael, Zos hatu'uda bi-Yisrael, Zos lefanimi. So this was the practice. And Zos hatu'uda means alzeh me'idim ha'idim. This is what the witnesses testified about. So since it says the word bi-Yisrael, so the Shach raises the possibility. Shach is the main commentary on Chosh Mishpat. So he says the pasuk sounds like it's implying that kinyan chalipin doesn't work for a non-Jew. Only works if the both parties are Jewish. Not like the Rabbeinu Tam. One of the Rishonim says that. The Ritva raises that objection against the Rabbeinu Tam, but the Shach didn't have that Ritva. The Shach says on his own. He thinks that maybe chalipin doesn't work if you're dealing with a non-Jew. So we make the kinyan chalipin, and then it's still questionable. So then we make a kinyan kifi minig hamdina. Minig hamdina in a lot of countries in Europe used to be. In America, certain businesses, that's the minig. When you shake hands, that constitutes a kinyan. Usually when Jews are selling diamonds. So when they would shake hands and say Mazel and Bracha, that means that they clinched the deal. And according to the minig hamdina, that constitutes a kinyan. That's what the Gemara calls situmta. Situmta is an Aramaic word that means when they would sell barrels of beer to someone else, they would write down on the top of the barrel who the barrel was sold to. They didn't make any kinyan yet. They just wrote it down. So the meaning was that nobody backs out. If he wrote down on the top of the barrel who the beer is sold to, neither party would back out. So the halacha recognizes that whatever constitutes a kinyan, according to the Hamdina, is considered a kinyan. So that's the practice. So we shake hands with the non-Jew. So we made the kinyan situmta. So the chametz belongs to the non-Jew. So what's wrong with that? What do you need 6 kinyan? What do you need another 5 kinyan for? So some of the poskim say the kinyan situmta, this kinyan that says in the Gemara, once you made that shake hands, that constitutes a kinyan. You can't back out. Some hold that's only a kinyan midirabanan. In our Torah, there is no such din. It's only constitutes a kinyan midirabanan, and and a kinyan midirabanan is not enough to solve the problem of bayira bayimotzi. You have to have a real kinyan. All the dinim midirabanan are just make believe. You act as if it's only a din in gabra. It's not a din in chefza. In truth, the chametz still belongs to the Jew. But if they go to court, the non-Jew will win. You act as if he sold it to the non-Jew. But he never really sold it because on the level of midaraisa, he never sold it. So that's why we do another kinyan. So we sell a chametz according to Dina de Malchusa. Whenever one of the parties involved is a non-Jew, then you follow secular law. So in New York State, I don't know, could be in New Jersey is the same, but in New York State, whenever you're selling metaltalim, you can accomplish a kinyan just by making an oral declaration. So the rabbi says, I represent all 100 families in my community, and I hereby declare I'm selling you all of the chametz, and you're going to have to pay after the holiday, after Pesach, you're going to pay the value of all of the chametz that you're buying. So you made a kinyan according to Dina the Machusa Dina. If both parties involved are Jewish, then Dina the Machusa is not going to help. But here, the non-Jew is buying the chametz, so Dina the Machusa takes effect. So the goy is kind of the chametz. The goy acquires ownership of the chametz based on the laws of New York State. So there also there's a pick book. Some of the poskim say that this halacha, that Dina the Machusa Dina, is good to make a kinyan, and neither party can back out. Somehow that's only midrabanan, and all Torah there is no such din. In Torah, you have to follow whatever the halacha says. The kinyanim are. You don't follow what the New York State legislature says. And since the whole kinyan is only midrabanan, it's only make believe, and you still own the chametz biblically, and you're still in violation of Bali Rabbi Matzah. So you already made 3 kinyanim, and each one has a pick book. Maybe the Chalipin is not good because it only works by Jews, so Slafanim be Israel. Maybe the Din of the Machusa is no good because it's only Midrabanan, and on the level of the rice is still on the Chametz. And maybe the Kinyan, according to the Minik Hamdina, shaking hands, that's a good Kinyan. Maybe it's also only Midrabanan, and it doesn't help to solve the problem on Bali Rabbi Matzah. So that's why we make another few Kinyanim. So we make another Kinyan Chotzer. How do you make a kinyan chotzer? So we don't just sell the chametz to the guy. We specify which closets, which rooms have the chametz, and we're renting. We don't have to sell the room to the non-Jew. Let's say I don't. If you don't own your apartment, you just rent it. So you can't sell it. You can only rent it. So I sublet the closet, or I sublet a room in my apartment, and I say, I'm renting out the room where the chametz is located to you, to Mr. John Doe, Mr. John Brown, the non-Jew, and because the chametz is located in his room, he acquires ownership with the kinyan chotzer. Kinyan chotzer is a legitimate kinyan, so the chametz belongs to the non-Jew. So what's wrong with that? So one of the early poskim from the late 1500s early 1600s, came up with a chiddush based on a gemara that chotzer doesn't work for a non-Jew. Why not? Because the Gemara in the first parak in Bava Metzia has an idea. You have to know how to understand the Gemara. It can't be taken literally. The Gemara says the chotzer acquires ownership. Even a dover shel hefker falls into my chotzer. I acquire ownership. That chotzer is midin shluchai. It's considered in a certain sense as if the chotzer is my shliach. We have a din that a non-Jew cannot have a shliach act on his behalf. The whole institution of shlichus, I can appoint a shliach to act on my behalf. The Jewish balabatim can appoint the rabbi as their shliach to sell a chametz for them. But a goy cannot have another person act as his shliach, so therefore the chotzer doesn't work. So we really don't hold like that. It seems to be explicitly against the Gemara. The Gemara says beferish in different places, the chotzer does work for a goy. But because one of the early poskim wrote like that, the Pashtus says that he's wrong. His name was Kai Danover. Rab Shmuel Aaron Kai Danover. He wrote the Sefer Birchas HaZebach. He was the last one who didn't use the Reb Yosef Karo's farm. Yosef Karo wrote the Shulchan Aruch. So when the Shulchan Aruch first came out, so not everybody went for it. So he was one of the misnagdim. He didn't hold from the Shulchan Aruch and from the Beis Yosef. He didn't need he can live without it. But then he used to give shiurim on the tour. And when he would get stuck, so the students would help him out. They would say what the Beis Yosef says, what Rabbi Yosef Karo quotes to explain it. So he finally gave in. He couldn't figure everything out without the assistance of Rabbi Yosef Karo. So he lived at that time a little soon after the late 1500s, the early 1600s, Rabbi Aaron Shmuel Kai Danover. So he came up with this wild idea that chotzer doesn't work for a non-Jew. So even though we make a kinyan chotzer, we're not so sure that it works. So we make another kinyan, we make a kinyan agav. What is a kinyan agav? The Gemara learns that out from a pasuk in Divrei Hayomim. It's not a pasuk in Chumash, a pasuk in Sefer Divrei Hayomim. That's the end of the Tanakh. That it says, if I give you ownership of karka, real estate, and metaltalim, and you made a kinyan on the karka, then you can acquire ownership of the metaltalim, of the portable goods, without making any kinyan at all. So we rent the apartment to the non-Jew. We fill out a document. We rent them a room in the apartment, rent the closets, and then if you hold a chotzer is no good, so you make agav. Agav, the renting of the room, agav, the renting of the closet, we are selling you all of the chametz. So new shoin, so you made a kinyan agav. So what is the question? So the Schachter throws a monkey wrench in over here. He says that there is a Taisus in Bava Kama, where Taisus writes that Kinyan Agav never appears in Chumash. It's only in Sefer Divrei Yomim. So the Gemara has a rule on the first half in Bava Kama, Divrei Torah, Divrei Kabbalah lo yafina. You cannot establish any din deraisa based on a pasuk in Nevi'im or Ksuvim. You have to have a pasuk in Chumash. If it's a biblical din, it has to say in Chumash. If it doesn't say in Chumash, only Divrei Hayomim, that's the end of Ksuvim. The 24 Sfarim and Tanakh Divrei Hayomim is the last. All the way to the end of the whole Tanakh is Sefer Divrei Hayomim. There are 24 books in the Tanakh, according to the Jewish Tanakh. In the Christian Bible, so they count Divrei Hayomim, Aleph Divrei Hayomim Beis is 2 books. We count it as 1 book. And then Malachim Aleph, Malachim Beis also. The Christians count it as 2 books, we count it as 1 book. And then what else is there? Shmuel Aleph, Shmuel Bet, then Ezra Nehemiah. Ezra Nehemiah in the Jewish Bible is only 1 sefer. In the Christian Bible, they count Ezra as 1 book and Nehemiah as another book. So because we count the Rayamim as 1 book and Malachim Aleph, Malachim Beis is 1, Shmuel Aleph, Shmuel Beis is 1 book, and Ezra Nehemiah is 1 book, that's why we have 24 Sfarim in the Kisvei HaKodesh. According to the Christian Bible, that most of the Bibles are like the Christian Bible, you have 28 books. You don't have 24, you have another 4. Shmuel Beis and Malachim Beis and Divrei Hayomim Beis and Ezra Nehemiah. So Divrei Hayomim is the last book in Tanakh. So Taisus says, Taisus thinks in Bava Kama that Kinyan Agav is only a Kinyan Midirabbanan. If it's a Kinyan Midirabbanan, so then again it's questionable. Maybe when the Chachamim made the takana of Kinyan Agav, maybe they never had in mind that it should work for non-Jews. Maybe they only had in mind that it should work for Jews, or even leaving out that possibility. That's what the Schachter raises a possibility. There's another possibility. If you hold it's only a Kinyan Midirabbanan, so maybe a Kinyan Midirabbanan is only make-believe. You'll win in it in Torah. But in all truth, the Chomet still belongs to me. Dinim Midirabbanan are only dinim how you have to act. It's a din on the Gavra, but it's not that something really changed. The ownership still belongs to me. If you'll demand it, I'll have to give it to you. You'll win it in Torah. But the Kinyan really never took effect. So we made already 5 Kinyanim. We made 5 Kinyanim, and each Kinyan has a little pikpuk. So that's why we make a 6th Kinyan. What's the 6th Kinyan? We have the Jew pay, we have the non-Jew pay for all of the chametz. What is that? Does that help? If you pay for the metaltalim, do you acquire ownership? So the Gemara says, whatever Kinyan works, when a Jew is selling to a non-Jew, when a Jew sells to a non-Jew, it's going to be the other Kinyan. It's not going to be the same Kinyan. The dinim are different. So which Kinyan works when a Jew sells to another Jew? Which Kinyan works on the level of their Isa biblically when you're selling metaltalim, a Jew to another Jew? So that's a famous dispute in the Gemara between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan is of the opinion that min haTorah ma'os works if the non-Jew pays in full for all the. If I'm selling, a Jew is selling to another Jew, and the Jew who's buying paid in full for the whole merchandise, then he owns it min haTorah, and it's only midirabbanan that he has the right to back out. But since if a Jew sells to another Jew, if you pay in full, ma'os, pay in full, it belongs to him, then if it's selling to a non-Jew, then you have to have hagboha. But Reish Lakish disagrees with Rabbi Yochanan. Reish Lakish has the opinion that when a Jew sells to another Jew, Meshicha works min haTorah, hagboha works min haTorah. So if you sell to a non-Jew, then ma'os will work. So how do we paskin? Do we paskin like Rabbi Yochanan? Do we paskin like Reish Lakish? So that's a machlekes Rashi and Tosfos. So according to Rashi, the din is like Reish Lakish that Meshicha works min haTorah. So then if you sell to a non-Jew, if he pays in full, then your Kinyan is valid. So according to Rashi, if the goy pays in full for all the chametz, that's an awful lot of money. The rabbi is selling everybody's chametz, 100 balabatim, there's a fortune of money. So if the goy pays in full, usually the goy does not pay in full in advance. So then, according to Rashi, the Kinyan is, the problem is solved. But Tosfos disagrees. Most of the Rishonim disagree with Rashi. They hold that the din is like Rabbi Yochanan. The Gemara has a rule. They voted in the later generations. They voted on every issue that there was a debate, and it turned out that in every case where there was a dispute between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, the consensus was like Rabbi Yochanan, except for 3 cases where the majority of the Chachamim agreed with Reish Lakish. So this doesn't seem to be one of the exceptions to the rule. So the din should really be like Rabbi Yochanan, that Vatara Mois works if you pay in full, if a Jew is selling to a Jew. So then when a Jew is selling to a Goy, then you need Meshicha. So that's what I did. I gave the carton with all the schnapps to the non-Jew. He paid me in full. So according to Rashi, he paid me the $25, and then he drank all the schnapps that night. Okay, there's nothing to discuss. There was no Bal Yirah by Matzah. He drank all the schnapps before Pesach came. The schnapps was not existent by the time it came Pesach. But I made both kinyanim in case he doesn't drink anything. I made the both kinyanim. He paid me in full $25 for all the schnapps bottles, and then he picked up the whole carton and he took it into his apartment. Right? So it's a kinyan hagbah and a kinyan chotza, everything. It was all his. So we do all of these 6 kinyanim. We do all the 6 kinyanim. That is the practice. Usually, the rabbi sells the chametz on Erev Pesach in the morning. You can only eat chametz till about 10:30, usually till the end of the 4th hour. The 5th hour in the morning, starting from sunrise to sunset, you divide the day into 12 equal units of time. That shows manios. So you can only eat chametz till the end of the 4th hour. The 5th hour, you're not allowed to eat chametz. And the 6th hour, you're not allowed to get benefit from the chametz. So usually it's about 10:30 in the morning. So the rabbi usually sells the chametz around 10:30 in the morning to the non-Jew. This year, Erev Pesach is Shabbos. So the rabbi can't sell the chametz on Shabbos. So the practice is the rabbi sells the chametz the second day before Pesach. He sells it on Friday. But the balabatim, some of the people are going to eat, the rabbi's selling at 10:30 in the morning on Friday. But some of the people are going to eat bread for lunch. They're going to eat challah for supper on Leil Shabbos. Some people are going to eat challah, chametz dika challah on Shabbos morning. So what do you mean? They're selling to the goy, then they're eating the chametz that they sold to the goy. That's gzeila. So the whole mechiras chametz is a sham. The whole thing is a fake. So we say no. We're only selling the chametz to the non-Jew. We're selling the chametz on Friday morning. We're only selling the chametz that will remain on Shabbos morning at 10:30. But on Friday morning, 10:30, you don't know which part of the challah is going to be eaten up and which part is going to be left behind. So that's an issue of breira. If I make a kinyan on Friday morning and I'm not sure, I have a lot of rolls of chametz. I'm not sure which rolls will be eaten up and which rolls will remain that I want to sell. So I want a kinyan to take effect on Friday, and I'm not sure what the kinyan is taking effect on. How many rolls of challah and which rolls is the kinyan taking effect on? So that's what the Gemara would call ein breira. I want the kinyan to take effect on Friday morning, and I'm not sure which. It'll only become mizbarer. We will only find out on Shabbos morning at 10:30 what the kinyan is taking effect on. So usually we say such a kinyan is not valid. So to solve the problem, you can do it easily. You say on Friday morning, the rabbi represents all 100 families in the community. He tells a non-Jew, I'm selling you all the chametz that will remain on Shabbos morning, 10:30, and the sale should take effect on Shabbos morning at 10:30. So at the time the sale is taking effect, Shabbos morning, 10:30, it'll already be mavura, which chametz is being sold and which chametz is not being sold. So that's how most rabbanim sell the chametz. They make all the kinyanim with the non-Jew on Friday morning, but they say we want the sale to take effect on Shabbos morning. After all, the religious Jews will finish eating the chametz. They'll be able to continue eating the meal on Shabbos morning, but they will finish eating the chametz by 10:30 in the morning on Shabbos. Shabbos is Erev Pesach. So Rabbi Akiva Eiger was a great Goyen who lived in the early 1800s. He used to correspond with the Yeshivas. They were the best of friends. They lived in 2 different countries. Rabbi Akiva Eiger was a Yeke, and the Yeshivas was a Galatiana. He was not at all a Yeke, but they used to correspond. The Balabatim fired the Yeshivas from his position because his wife gave him a hard time, and he had no choice. He had to divorce his wife. So the Balabatim felt it was such a scandal that the rabbi divorced his wife. He's not fit to be a rabbi, so they fired him. Rabbi Akiva Eiger sent a letter to the Balabatim. How can you fire this rabbi? He's the Gadol Ador. And he was involved in the divorce also. Rabbi Akiva Eiger corresponded with Mrs. Lorberbaum. he sent her a letter, please act properly or your husband's going to have to divorce you. So that's, he was fired from his position. Then he went into business. The Yeshivas went into business after they fired him. It's the whole story. So the Rabbi Akiva Eger writes in one of he has quite a few svarim. Rabbi Akiva Eger writes in one of his svarim, he thinks that you're not allowed to sell or buy anything on Shabbos and Yom Tov. I mean, it's mutter to make kinyanim. You can't handle money. Money is muktzah, but you can make kinyanim without handling the money. The Rabbi Akiva Eger says that, so the Gemara says you're not permitted to sell or buy anything on Shabbos and Yom Tov, because usually when you sell or buy, you write a record, you write it down. So it's Gzeir Shem Yichtov. So Rabbi Akiva Eger has a chiddush, even though you made all the kinyanim on Friday morning, and you want the kinyan to take effect, the sale of the chametz should take effect on Shabbos morning at 10:30 Shabbos morning, the people are in the middle of the meal. They're not doing anything with the non-Jew. They're not actively engaged in making any kinyanim on Shabbos. Rabbi Akiva Eger has a chiddush that that's a violation of Mekach HaMemkar. Since you made a statement, you made a declaration on Friday morning that you want the kinyan to take effect on Shabbos morning at 10:30, you're in violation of Mekach HaMemkar, even though you're totally shei be'al taseh. Even though you're totally passive on Shabbos, you're not making the kinyanim on Shabbos. So Rabbi Akiva Eger thinks you're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to sell a chametz on Friday, stipulating that the one you kinyan to take effect on Shabbos morning. Rabbi Akiva Eger says you have to sell the chametz on Friday morning and say whatever will be left over on Shabbos morning, the kinyan should take effect today. So most of the Rabbanim are unhappy with that because of the issue of Ein Breira. On Friday morning at 10:30, you don't know which chametz is going to remain, which chametz will be eaten up. So that you should say that the kinyan doesn't take effect at all. That's a violation of the din of Ein Breira. So the two, half of the Rabbanim will do like this, half will do like that. Most of the Rabbanim will sell a chametz. That used to be the practice. Most of the Rabbanim sell a chametz in such a way that the kinyan should take effect on Shabbos morning. And less than half will sell a chametz that the kinyan should take effect on Friday morning. But they're two, clearly they're two different practices on this. Usually we do the bedikas chametz the night, Leil Arba Asar, the night before Erev Pesach. So this year, the night before Erev Pesach, Friday night. So you can't walk around with a candle to do bedikas chametz. So maybe today, if you leave all the lights on in the house, maybe you'll be able to do bedikas chametz. But in the days of the Gemara, they didn't have such a thing. So they had no ability. You can't do bedikas chametz on Friday night. So the Chachamim made a takana. You have to do the bedikas chametz on Thursday night. What if it would be a regular year and you would do bedikas chametz? Let's say you're leaving your apartment, going to Eretz Yisrael, or I'm going to visit by my children. I have a son in Minneapolis, so we're going to go there for Pesach. So we're going to leave the house on Thursday. We're not going to be home Thursday night to do bedikas chametz. So when you do, or the students leave the dormitory in advance before Thursday night, they're not going to leave on Friday morning. They're going to leave way before Thursday night. So when they do bedikas chametz, do you say a bracha or not? If you do a bedika mukdemes before the zman that the Chachamim suggested that you should do bedikas chametz. So that was a big dispute in the days of the Rishonim. The Meiri, in the beginning of Pesachim, quotes this argument, and the generally accepted practice in the Shulchan Aruch is that one does not recite a bracha. How come you only say bracha on the bedikas chametz if you do it the night that you're supposed to? If you do it earlier, you don't say bracha. Why? It's also takanos chachamim. So when you learn the beginning of Pesachim, they explain why. One only recites a bracha. Let's say a person shaves with an electric shaver because he doesn't want to violate the avera of shaving with a razor. So does he recite the bracha? Or you go to a kosher restaurant and you eat food, or you eat food at home. Well, you have to go to the restaurant. You eat food at home. So on Pesach night, you say two brachas. You say Hamotzi Lechem and Haaretz, Shekedeshana b'mitzvayis v'tzivano al achilas matzah. So every day when you eat kosher food, you say two brachas. You eat your Cheerios. You say Bari Minim Mezainis, or your Wheaties, whatever you're having, and then you say Shekedeshana b'mitzvayis v'tzivano shelo lechem macholas asuras. But we don't say a bracha when you're about to do something to avoid violation of an avera. I'm going to shave with an electric shaver in order not to violate the avera of shaving with a razor. I'm going to eat kosher food in order not to violate the Avera of eating non-kosher food. So you don't say a bracha. You only say a bracha when you're going to fulfill a mitzvah saseh, not when you're going to avoid violation of a mitzvah lo saseh. So the poskim all assume if you do bedikas chametz earlier than you're supposed to, that's only done to avoid violation of Bal Yirah by Matzah. When you do the bedikas chametz leil yud dalid, or this year leil yud gimel, that's the mitzvah ach b'yam rishon tashbisu. You can't read the Megillah a week before Purim. You can't eat matzah on Pesach, and you can't light Neres Chanukah a week before Chanukah. You have to do, all the mitzvahs have to be done at the proper time. So the mitzvah of bir chametz, to destroy chametz, is Bayom Harishon. Yom Harishon means not the first day Pesach, it means Erev Pesach. So bedikas chametz is the beginning of the destroying of the chametz. So kach tiknu chachamim, the bedikas chametz should take place Leil Yud Daled, the 14th of Nisan. And that's the bedika, is the beginning of the tashbisa, the beginning of the mitzvah, so you're fulfilling the mitzvah. Whenever Leil Yud Daled is Shabbos, the Chachamim instituted that correct zman for the bir chametz should be the night before. Do the bedika Leil Yud Gimel and burn the chametz in the morning. But if a person is going to do a bedika mukdemis earlier than that, like lighting Neres Chanukah on Sukkot and sitting in Sukkah and Pesach and eating matzah on Shavuos, you're doing the mitzvah at the wrong time, even if it's only one day off. It's not the right day to fulfill the mitzvah. So that's why the common practice is we follow. That's why it says in Shulchan Aruch. You only recite a bracha if you're doing the bedikas chametz on the correct day. If you're doing it earlier, then no bracha is recited. Usually, the Gemara says when one completes the bedikas chametz, he recites a declaration, any chametz that I didn't, a bittul chametz, kol chamira. Kol chamira is Aramaic. Most people don't know Aramaic, so it's better to say in English, or Yiddish, or Hebrew, or German, whatever language one speaks, French, whatever language you say. You shouldn't say it in Aramaic if you don't know what the words mean. So we make, the Gemara made a takana after you finish bedikas chametz, so you should make a declaration, any chametz that I'm not aware of, the chametz that you're aware of after the bedikas chametz, so you're going to eat some of it for supper and for breakfast tomorrow morning. And you're going to eat then we're doing the bedikas chametz on Thursday night, so we're going to use it breakfast, lunch, and Leil Shabbos and Shabbos morning also possibly. We're going to eat chametz the whole time. So you're not going to be mevatel the chametz that you know about. You make a declaration. You're mevatel all the chametz that you haven't seen, the chametz that you're not aware of. So you're mevatel that chametz. What is accomplished by being mevatel the chametz? So the Gemara says, once you bake bittul chametz, there's no Bal Yirah by matzah. What does it mean, bittul chametz? That's a famous dispute between Rashi and Tosfos, and the text that we use covers both bases. Covers Rashi's opinion and Tosfos' opinion. So Rashi is of the opinion, when you make a declaration, I do not plan any chametz that I don't know of. I do not plan to eat it. I do not plan to gain any benefit from it. I'm not going to sell it. He's going to ask the rabbi to sell a chametz that he is aware of, but he's not going to ask the rabbi to sell a chametz that he does know about. But if he does know, he does know. So he says, I don't plan to eat it. I don't plan to gain any benefit from it. I'm not interested at all. So according to Rashi, that declaration, that oral declaration, is a fulfillment of the mitzvah of tashbisu. You make a declaration that you're going to follow what it says in the Torah. You're not going to eat the chametz. As far as you're concerned, it's junk. You're not going to get any benefit from it. Tosfos says, how is that tashbisu? Tashbisu means you have to destroy it from the face of the earth. You have to burn it, or you have to flush it down the toilet, or you have to crush it up and scatter it in the wind, just to make a declaration that I plan not to gain any benefit. I'm not going to eat it. I'm not going to gain benefit from it. That's not a mitzvah of tashbisu. You didn't do anything to the chametz. Just made a declaration. So Tosfos disagrees with Rashi, and Tosfos' opinion is that bittul chametz means you're mafkir the chametz. You declare it as ownerless. If the chametz doesn't belong to you, then Tosfos says it's not your problem. You only violate by matzah if the chametz belongs to you. The word lecha means possession, ownership. If I'm mafkir the chametz and it doesn't belong to me. Rashi would say not so. Rashi says if the chametz doesn't belong to you, it's correct that there's no Bal Yirah by matzah, but you haven't fulfilled the mitzvah. That's a harama. That's a shtick. That's a legality. That's a legal fiction to avoid violation of Bal Yirah. I declare the chametz as hefkes, and therefore it's not my responsibility. I don't violate by Rabbi Matzah. Let's say I have goyim coming to do work in the house. They have to fix something in the plumbing on Chalamoid, and they brought in their sandwiches, and they're going to eat the chametz sandwiches in my home. The Gemara said, there's no by Rabbi Matzah. The chametz doesn't belong to me. It belongs to the non-Jew. If the chametz belongs to a non-Jew, it's not my problem about Rabbi Matzah. So according to Rashi, it's not right to be mafke the chametz. If you're mafke the chametz, that's a harama to avoid violation of Rabbi Matzah, but you're not a fulfillment of the mitzvah of tashbisu. So what you should really say, that's our nusach, and say any chametz or any derivative of chametz that happens to be in a, if they finish the bedikas chametz, you have to make a declaration. Any chametz or derivative of chametz that I'm not aware of, the lo chazit, the lo bi'arte, whatever I'm not aware of, should be batel, like the dust of the earth. I don't plan to eat it. I don't plan to gain any benefit from it. And then you add on the lehevi hefker. And I also declared that it should become hefker. So the lehevi hefker is to satisfy Tosafos' opinion. But first, before you say that it's hefker, first say libatel kafra dara. Let it be batel like the dust of the earth. I don't plan to eat it. I don't plan to gain any benefit from it. So then, according to Rashi, you have fulfilled the mitzvah of tashbisu. You haven't destroyed the chametz, but you made a declaration that you're not going to gain any benefit from it. That is the kiyum hametz. Yeah, this year in Shulchan Aruch they raise an issue. What are you going to do with shalosh shudas? Usually we say on Shabbos. Usually you say you have to have lechem mishnah for shalosh shudas. You have to have 2 chalas. But on Erev Pesach in the afternoon, Shabbos afternoon, you're not allowed to eat chametz. You have to stop eating chametz around 10:30 in the morning. So you eat matzah, have lechem mishnah matzah. So the Talmud Yerushalmi is quoted in Shulchan Aruch. Tosafos quotes the Talmud Yerushalmi. You're not allowed to eat matzah on Erev Pesach. So you can't eat matzah, you can't eat chametz. So what are you going to have lechem mishnah for shalosh shudas? So there's one opinion in Tosafos that you don't need lechem mishnah. The first 2 meals, the 1 meal on Friday night and the 1 meal on Shabbos in the daytime, have to have challah, and you have to bench and say ritzei. And if you forget to say ritzei, you're yotze the benching, but you're not yotze the suda Shabbos, so you would have to bench again. But for shalosh shudas, there's one opinion that you don't need bread. But the common practice is that many people are makbid that they dafke have lechem mishnah. You have bread for shalosh shudas. That's what the Vilna Gaon interprets in the Zohar. There's a passage in the Zohar that when you say hamoitzi on Shabbos over the lechem mishnah, we make a zecher to the lechem haponim. There was a shulchan in the Beis Hamikdash and the Hershel in the Beis Hamikdash, and on the shulchan they used to put every Shabbos morning 12 lechem haponim. 12, they're not chalas, they're matzah. 12 matzahs, 6 in one pile, 6 sheish amarachas, 2 piles, one next to the other, on top of the shulchan, and there were 12 matzahs. So it says in the Zohar that on Shabbos, when you eat the lechem mishnah, you should have 12 zecher lechem haponim. Where do you have 12? So some Hasidic Rebbes will say hamoitzi. They used to, and they still do it now. They say hamoitzi on 2 chalas and have another 10 chalas on the table somewhere. So the 2 and the 10 adds up to 12. Others have a geflochtene challah that consists of 12 different units. You can pull it apart. You don't need a knife to slice it. You can pull apart. They make 12 different chalalach and they stick them all together and it bakes together, but it's easily separated into 12. So each challah has 12 parts to it. And the Vilna Gaon said, the Vilna Gaon was anti-Hasidic practices. So he says, whatever they do is by definition wrong. Chassidim don't know what they're doing. So he says, no, they misunderstood the Zohar. The Vilna Gaon was of the opinion that when you have a lechem mishnah on Shabbos and Yom Tov, you have to cut both challahs. If you only cut one challah, you don't cut the other challah. It's like it's still in the store. It's not. It doesn't join. It's not part of the lechem mishnah. Even though you're only going to eat one challah, you have to cut both. So he says if you have 2 challahs on Friday night, 2 challahs on Shabbos morning, 2 challahs shalosh shudas. So 2, 2, and 2 is 6, and you cut everything in half. So you have 12. So you have 12 chatzoim. Not that you need 12 challahs. You have 12 half challahs because each meal you have to have lechem mishnah. So if you have 6 altogether, 6 full challahs, and you cut everything in half, they don't go and follow that opinion. You have to cut both challahs. Not enough if you cut one of the 2. You have to cut both of the challahs. So that's the shaila. What are you going to do on Erev Pesach for shalosh shudas? You can't say hamotzi on matzah. You're not allowed to eat matzah on Erev Pesach. You can't hamotzi on challah. You can't eat chametz from 10:30 more. So what can you eat? So Tosfos says, and that's the Psak and Shulchan Aruch, if you have matzah ashira, if you have matzah that's made with mei peris, with fruit juice, that's not acceptable for Pesach night for the Seder. Pesach night has to be called lechamoni. It can't be matzah ashira. Lechamoni means just flour and water. It shouldn't have any flavoring. So if you have egg matzah, if you have matzah ashira that you cannot use for the Seder to be yotze the mitzvah, so the Tosfos is of the opinion that can use that. You're allowed to eat that on Erev Pesach. The prohibition, you're not allowed to eat chametz on Erev Pesach. You're not allowed to eat matzah, but this is puzzle for matzah, so this you can use. So they had a taina for many years. The egg matzah was only made with eggs and apple juice, apple cider. And according to the Rambam, that's not called matzah ashira. The Rambam has a very strange opinion. For many generations, no one in the world understood what in the world the Rambam is talking about. 100 years ago, one of the Gedolim came up with a pshat that's better than nothing, an ingenious pshat. But the Rambam's opinion is very strange. It's only called matzah shira if it has one of the four mashkim in it. Yain, shem, and dvash cholov. So the egg matzah didn't have any of the four. Didn't have yain, shemen, dvash cholov. It just has apple juice and it has eggs. So according to the Rambam, egg matzah is kosher for Leil HaSeder. We don't paskin like the Rambam. So Rabbi Soloveitchik and others had a taina. How can you use egg matzah on Erev Pesach for Shalashudis? According to the Rambam, is good for, but we don't pass like the Rambam. But now, in the last 20 years, the matzah companies, when it's going to be Erev Pesach, Shecholias B'Shabbos, some of the matzah companies, not all of them, some of them make the egg matzahs with wine in it to take care of this issue. So even according to the Rambam's opinion, that's called matzah shira. So if you plan to use egg matzah on Erev Pesach for the Lechem Mishneh, for Shalashudis, that's what my family always did that. My father did like that. We always had egg matzah when it's Erev Pesach, Cholias B'Shabbos. Who needs the whole headache of having chametz and leaving all the crumbs and flushing the crumbs down the toilet? It's a whole headache. So we got rid of all of the chametz on Erev Shabbos, and on Friday night and on Shabbos morning and Shalashudis in the afternoon, we had egg matzah. In Shulchan Aruch, the Ashkenazim, the Ramah quotes the Ashkenazim have a minig. The Sfardim never had this minig. The Ashkenazim had a minig not to eat egg matzah all of Pesach. Why? Because Rashi has a unique opinion that we absolutely do not paskin like. Rashi has a very strange opinion that if you mix flour with juices, with fruit juices, it can become chametz faster than if you mix it with water. It's mimaher lahachmetz. The Gemara says that it's not bothered that make peris ein machmitzim, apple juice will not turn into chametz. Rashi says it can become chametz gomer. Chimutz is a process. It takes a long time. So the beginning of the process will happen faster than if you mix in water. But the gemara of the process will never take place. So according to Rashi, you're not allowed to eat egg matzah all of Pesach. So even though we don't paskin like Rashi, so the Ashkenazim developed a minig that you don't eat egg matzah the whole Pesach. Only if a person really needs it. That's why on the Strites matzahs, Rabbi Soloveitchik used to give the Hashgacha, used to give the Hershel. So they printed in Hebrew, it's only mutar l'cholim u'lizkenim. Healthy people shouldn't eat it. So they asked Rabbi Soloveitchik, what does it help you write it in Hebrew? Most people don't understand the Hebrew. You should write it in English. So he explained, he thinks that his egg matzah is permissible even for the healthy people. So he only puts it in Hebrew, l'chomra b'yam. He thinks, why? So he said in Strites, that's what it used to be years ago. I don't know if it's still the same. He said in Strites factory, when they make the egg matzah, he sees to it that there's always something banging on the matzah the whole time till it goes into the oven. So the whole chumrah not to eat egg matzah is because it may be memaher lahachmitz. But if you keep on having hisaskus, they're always doing work with the matzah, that'll prevent it from becoming chametz. So he thought that his egg matzah was really mutter even for healthy people, but he puts it in Hebrew. So it's only mutter l'cholim l'skein. Yeah, that is the story of mechiras chametz. Complicated to make 6 kinyanim because each kinyan has a pick book. each kinyan, there is a far out opinion that it's not valid. There's no opinion in the world. All the 6 kinyanim are not valid. Each kinyan has a minority opinion that it's not a valid kinyan when you're selling to a non-Jew. So we make the minig developed. It started off by selling behema hamavakeres. The minig developed originally when the Jewish farmers were selling the animals that are about to give birth. I remember many years ago, over 30 years ago, I was in the middle of giving a shiur a week before Pesach. So someone comes into my classroom and they say, there's a telephone call for me on the payphone in the hallway. Now there are no more payphones. Everybody walks around with a cell phone. Nobody uses a payphone. So there used to be a payphone on my floor. So they tell me it's a telephone call. So I say, tell them I'm in the middle of shiur. So the student says, I told him that, but the person said it's an emergency. So I come to the phone, in the middle of my shiur, I come to the phone, what's the emergency? A rabbi from the West Coast, older than me, my father's age. He's old enough to be my father. He was my father. He passed away already by now. But at that time, so he says he has a balabas who became a shomer mitzvahs, became observant, and he started studying Kitzur Shulchan Aruch in English. He can't read the Hebrew, and he read that, and this balabas's business is that he has a farm and he owns behemoths. And the behemoths, the season to give birth is in the springtime. Human beings are born every day of the year, I think, equally. But in behemoths, the season they usually, when they all give birth, is around Chodesh Nisan, this time of the year. So it says in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch that the Jew who owns animals should make a shutvis with a non-Jew, so he won't have a headache with a b'chor behemoth tahira. And then it says in the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, it's the abridged form, it says how are you supposed to make a kinyan? How do you accomplish the sale to give 1% ownership to the non-Jew? So it says, ask your local Orthodox rabbi, in the days of the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, ask your local Orthodox rabbi and he'll arrange it for you. So he asked his rabbi, who was my father's age, yes, his rabbi, how do you, please take care of this, please sell the Behema Hamavakeres, because they're about to give birth. They're going to give birth any day now. So he has to make a kinyan with the non-Jew. So I asked the rabbi jokingly, did you ever do mechiras chametz? Of course he does mechiras chametz every year. So he says, of course he does. He was already in his 60s then. So I told him, the mechiras chametz is patterned after selling the behema hamavakeres to the non-Jew. Exactly the same way you do the mechiras chametz. That's how you sell the behema that's about to give birth. So he says to me, maybe you can review with me how you're supposed to sell the chametz. This is after being in the rabbinate for over 30 years, maybe over 40 years. I should review with them how you're supposed to do. But that's what it is. The mechiras chametz is patterned after selling the behema hamavakeres. Okay, we should all have a healthy and a wonderful Pesach, and we should be able to get together in person next time.
Thank you very much, Rosh Schachter. Wishing Rosh Yeshiva Chag Kosher V'Sameach. Just one item of clarification. Did Rebbe say about eating egg matzahs till when on Erev Pesach? Shechalias v'Shabbos.
Till the simple shita is that you can eat all day long. The Gemara says when you have a chumrah, for example, we have a chumrah in the Gemara, the chametz is b'mashu. All other treifas are batal b'shishim, and chametz is not batal b'shishim. So in the Shulchan Aruch, the psak that's accepted is chametz is b'mashu, it's not batal b'shishim, that's only on Pesach. But chametz that gets mixed in on Erev Pesach is batal b'shishim. And the same thing, kitnias. Ashkenazim have a minig, we don't eat kitnias, they don't eat corn on the cob and beans and so on. So that minig is only on Pesach. On Erev Pesach, there's no minig not to eat kitnias. If by mistake you bought a lot of kitnias, you can eat all you want on Erev Pesach. On Pesach, you can't eat it. I remember once, someone called me up on Chalamoid Pesach many years ago. Someone from Teaneck called me up on the phone. He came home from work. He went to work Chalamoid, comes home, and his wife says, darling, look what I made special for supper on Chalamoid, corn on the cob. So the fellow's a yeki. He starts screaming, corn on the cob, it's kitnias. Made the whole house strafe. So he's ready to divorce his wife. So he calls me on the phone. What does he do? So I said, there's no dinner bal yamatzah on corn on the cob. Wrap up the corn, put it in the refrigerator, and after Pesach, you'll eat it. The pot doesn't become treif. It's a minig that you don't eat corn on the cob, but it doesn't make the pot treif. So you just wait 24 hours. If you really made the pot treif with something that's really treif min Torah midrabanan, then it doesn't help just to wait 24 hours. Then you have to kasher the pot, and you can't kasher a pot on Pesach. You can't kasher it because chametz is b'mashahu. But if it's only kitnias, so it says in the Farish and the Shach and Yeredeya, you just wait 24 hours and then you can use it for whatever you want on Pesach. So he didn't divorce his wife. They're still happily married together. Yeah.
So the Rosh Yeshiva is saying that that people can eat egg matzah if they use egg matzah, they can eat egg matzah
all day long. They can use. So you can have shalosh seudos in the afternoon. The Rambam writes that on Shabbos you have to have. He's quoting the Gemara. You have to have chetzi l'Hashem and chetzi l'Lachem. So the Rambam says, and the program is like this: you daven ma'ariv on Friday night or Yontav night, whatever happens to eat. The Friday night, let's say, that's chetzi l'Hashem. Then you eat the first meal. You daven in the morning shachris and musaf. Then you eat the second meal. Shabbos afternoon, you daven mincha. Then you eat the third meal. Lachem, l'Hashem, lachem, chetzi l'Hashem, chetzi l'Lachem, chetzi l'Hashem, chetzi l'Lachem. So from the Rambam, it would appear that the more correct practice is you should eat shalosh seudos after having daven mincha in the afternoon on Shabbos. So in my neighborhood, we have every Shabbos we have an early minyan for mincha. So whoever wants at 1:45. So all year long, summer and winter, so you can always have your shalosh seudos after davening mincha. So if it's egg matzah, that's matzah shira. You could the minig only is you don't eat matzah shira on Pesach. There is a minority opinion that the Ramah is recording, minig Ashkenaz, that you don't eat egg matzah not only on Pesach, even on Erev Pesach also. After 10:30 in the morning, you don't eat egg matzah. But the Pashta says that that's not the accepted opinion. The whole thing is such a chumrah, not to eat egg matzah on Pesach. Many Achronim say it doesn't make any sense. This Rashi's opinion is totally not accepted. Why should you even have this midas chasidus? Out of respect for Rashi, we don't eat the egg matzah. So genuk, if you don't eat egg matzah on Pesach, you're not mechuyev to make the chumras on Erev Pesach. Like gebroks, the Hasidim don't eat gebroks on Pesach, but in the last day of Pesach, they do eat gebroks. Where do they get that from? Because in Shulchan Aruch, Rabbi Yosef Kara wrote to Shulchan Aruch, so he writes, there was a minig, you don't eat dried out fruits. You don't eat raisins. Dried out fruits are on Pesach unless it was done under Hashgacha. Because maybe there was some release agent that was chametzik. In our generation, when they write, let's say if they sell dried out fruits, so they have to write all the ingredients. So they write all it has is grapes, raisins. That's all. So they're not required to write a release agent. They spray. Sometimes they spray on the conveyor belt. They spray something so that when they dry out the fruits, it won't get stuck to the conveyor belt. So the release agent that they spray on the belt is not an ingredient. So that could be chametz, that could be treif, that could be chametz. You don't know what it is because they don't tell you they're not obligated to tell you on the package what the release agent is. So the meaning was in the days of the Shulchan Aruch that on Pesach, you don't eat dried out fruits because maybe there's some chametz mixed in that you don't know about unless you have a hashgacha. But in the last day of Pesach, we do allow it. Same thing Erev Pesach, or whatever is only a chumrah, doesn't apply, only applies on Pesach. Doesn't apply the last day Pesach, doesn't apply on Erev Pesach.
So Rabbi, washing after mincha on Erev Pesach, so toward the afternoon Erev Pesach, that would still be mutter?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be the same issue as any other Erev Yontif? I mean,
right. So there would be a chumrah, but mikra din, it's not really. So there would be a chumrah. You shouldn't eat it the last 3 hours of the day. The last 3 hours of the day, that's called samach al mincha ktana. Mincha ktana is 2.5 hours at the end of the day. The samach means a half an hour before. So the last 3 hours of the day, something like 4 o'clock or so, I don't know. From 4 o'clock to 7 o'clock is about 3 hours. So the last 3 hours, but if you didn't have shalosh seudos yet, you're even permitted to have it in the last 3 hours of the day.
Oh, okay.
Very good.
I thank Rebbe very much, and kosher v'sameach.
Amen.
And
one more question.
Please.
If somebody finds a bottle of whiskey in the middle of Pesach, after selling the chametz before Pesach,
Yeah.
what should happen to the bottle of whiskey?
The bottle of whiskey we really sold to the non-Jew. So then if we find it, we're surprised to find it where it didn't belong. So we should put it in the cabinet where we have all the other chametz. We shouldn't pour it down the drain. We shouldn't pour it down the toilet because we sold it to the guy. So that's geneva. So since we sold it, we should put it in the room or in the closet where we have all of the chametz. That is correct. Yes.
One additional question was, before the 1800s, where the Mechiras Chametz was, they didn't have the whole development of selling through the Rav, et cetera, what was the accepted approach besides, I mean, just get rid of all your chametz and that was it?
Yeah, they didn't have like we have today, boxes of spaghetti and boxes of cookies. You have a ton of cookies in the house, enough to last for a whole year. They didn't have these kind of things. They baked a little bit and they ate it up. So whatever was left over, they would destroy.
And what would happen with the
Refrigerators,
chametz?
they didn't have freezers, yeah.
I understand, but what would have happened with the chametz technically that's on your dishes, etc.? How did they deal with that whole question? Because you couldn't sell the dishes because then you'd have a whole issue of buying back and tefillah and everything else.
Right.
So how was that handled?
This is clear in the Gemara that the violation of Bal Yorah by Matzah only applies on food. It doesn't apply on the blias in the pot. There's no Bal Yorah on the blias unless you have a pot that has chametz stuck on the outside. On the inside, you have a chunk of chametz stuck on it. But most people don't have that. Most people, after you finish using the pot, you remove all of the chametz. You don't leave the spaghetti stuck on the pot. So the Gemara is explicit that there's no Bal Yorah by Matzah on the blias in the kelim.
Okay, got it.
Very good. A good niyantav, everybody.
Thank you, Rebbe.
Very good.
Also a good niyantav.